everyone, because you have to be able to share them, otherwise it's a bribe.
Yeah, I don't share. She gives
I mean, I don't even know what all was, I just know that she.
This is
What kind of
time.
are they?
And I knew when she, I told her, I said, you
Which
know
office they
that's
going
really
to?
going on. I said, she probably was really stressed out and overwhelmed. And, yeah, I think she was just frustrated with.
Who's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Patty was
My
texting
daughter.
me this morning.
How old is she?
Do you have?
See,
Oh,
gosh.
yeah.
Ran away from home today.
Oh,
They got
this is
this
their
stuff.
boyfriends, I'm stuck with them too.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
at least you know where they are.
This is true, and I do, like, all the time, there's not anyone really in Fayette that I'm not aware of.
I talked to Robert, that just like this, my daughter, with lymphoma, when she was in the 11th grade, and so my daughter went to.
Here's my old notebook back.
Maybe she's gonna die, you know?
Yeah.
Do you like that?
Well, they can probably do it to you, I get it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be doing the town's job.
At least she got it out of her system when she was young. But she's fine now.
She settled down
Oh,
now.
yeah, she does so.
Got it all done.
Early afternoon would be better.
How about one-ish?
One-ish.
Whenever I'm moving.
Do you want us to come here?
Her name is
Nicole.
Nicole.
1 o'clock, okay, I'll have Jason come
Nicole,
over.
I'm Teresa.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we've gotta get, well, actually.
I remember, crazy, I knew it,
1 o'clock.
one of the council meetings
Text
a
me,
while ago.
remind me where I'm supposed to be tomorrow, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you want to put a inventory in your calendar?
I think I can do
Well, yeah, I can, I'll do it and I'll invite you.
Everybody feeling ready?
that. Yeah, do that.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll do it, and I'll put a timer on it, I'll put a little reminder on it. too.
I'm gonna have a question. I'll do a little bit of talking here up front for a reason, because I think you're going to need to conduct a little bit of organizational business first.
All right, Rick, you trying to get started?
I'm just talking to them in general, that I will.
Thanks, ladies, for participating. Thank you for putting forth the time and effort. I'm not gonna be able to stay for the whole evening. I have some things at the house to attend to. Trying to come out, thank you.
I think Nathan knows what's going on.
And Nicole, one, I want you to thank First Citizens
For allowing me.
for
to
allowing
do
you to participate in the American process.
that. You're welcome
And
for
let First
emailing the
Citizens know-
compliance
let the First
department.
Citizens know whenever they don't wanna be a fascist socialist company and control your after-hours work, tell them to give it a call.
They didn't want you on there?
No, it's just a compliance thing, I had to get
So
approval.
you gonna do laundry?
Wow.
That's exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm going
If
on
I
the
can
You
laundry.
just made a comment on what you
That's
want.
exactly what I'm doing.
Send yourself home and mayor.
All right,
Make
Mayor,
it
Merry
real.
Christmas.
How long do you think you'll be here?
We're gonna take a break around 11:30. About an hour.
You know, that kind of
Right,
thing.
If you, then they mark one.
1 o'clock. That's it.
11, 1 o'clock. That's like 11:30 or something?
It won't go.
All right, do we have an agenda, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
No published agenda?
I told you to send them, but you didn't send them.
I will send agenda items, which,
But you didn't do that.
well, this is the same old agenda item.
Oh,
Oh, fine.
it's the old agenda.
Where did you guys get these? Cause I cleaned up.
Okay.
It's okay.
I don't, where'd you get this, Teresa? I ordered.
Hey, have you smelled
I'm making sure my phone's turned off, I'm sorry.
That's a great idea.
What's the difference?
Is everybody ready? Okay. You have not had an organizational meeting yet, I take it. So, what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask the town administrator, town manager.
He's an administrator.
Administrator.
We've been
Then I'm gonna shift away from that and go to the clerk or deputy clerk
Yeah.
and ask the deputy clerk to call the meeting to order for just a moment. And then we're gonna commence with a few housekeeping items.
That was fun.
Okay, it's good now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Would you mind? You get to call the meeting to order in the absence of chair. Say, I call this meeting to order and write down the time,
Okay.
minutes.
Yeah, since you're the clerk.
I call this meeting to order
6:16.
6:15.
And then defer to me. Defer to me.
Oh, yeah.
And I defer to Rick Flo.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Esquire.
Thank you, members of the board. Congratulations on your appointment. Members of the governing board on their lucky election. Oh boy, everybody should sign up for that one, right? And members of the public and staff. My name is Rick Flo. Some of you met me before when I was here earlier. Since that time, the planning board has been duly appointed. And so this is your inaugural official meeting as a planning board. The reason I'm taking a little bit of a lead right now is so that we can take care of a little bit of initial organizational business. Interestingly enough, in your rules of procedure, which will appear at the very back of your notebook, you should have a set of rules of procedure. I can't remember if it was 27, tab 27, but one of the things that you need to do is at an annual meeting, which conveniently is ideal for around December or January every year, is to elect officers, like a chair and a vice chair. The town clerk or deputy clerk will always serve as the clerk to the board and take minutes and things of that nature, so you don't need secretary, you don't need treasurer, okay? So with that said, I'm gonna ask you if there are any nominations among the members present for a chair and or a vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Nancy Davis for chair, please.
Are you getting this? Who's saying what? Okay. Okay. Any other nominations for chair?
I nominate Nancy as well, but.
Oh, well, we were getting ready to vote on it, so that's a second, we'll take that as a second. Okay, all right, we'll, consider the nominations closed and ask all those in favor of Ms. Davis to be the chair to raise your hand. It is unanimous, 4-0, congratulations. Now, I'd like to suggest that either I can or the chair can call for nominations for vice chair. And I can step aside on the officiating.
Will you do it in that way? I will learn.
I'll do it. I'll do it, because part of my job and role here, and I
Is
love
to
this,
teach us.
when
Is
it's
to
a
teach
new
us.
planning board,
Yeah,
is to help you develop as a planning board, not just to go through our project.
okay.
So I don't mind that at all. Doesn't even cost you a dime. Hint, hint, hint. Give me a bonus or something. No, your planning board, vice chair is, their role is to chair the meeting in the absence of the chair. If the chair cannot attend one of the regular meetings, then the vice chair would just assume that role without any special action. They would just conduct the meeting or lead the meeting. Some of the powers and duties of that are, number one, calling the meeting to order. Number two, calling for votes and things of that nature when they're necessary, like you've heard me do, like asking, are there nominations, for example, or are there motions for a recommendation or an approval of something? And then asking for any second. There's always has to be a second to a motion for the motion to advance. When the motion advances, you can then ask for any discussion on the motion. Is there any discussion about this motion? If there is none, then call for the matter, and that means let's vote on it. And you'll hear me talk about always voting, always making your motions in the affirmative. Okay, if you're against something, don't say I make a motion to reject something, because then a no means yes and a yes means no, and people get confused.
Right.
Always call for the matter, and then you can all vote no if you don't like it. Right? Doesn't matter, calling for the matter doesn't mean you support it, it just means let's get on with it,
Right.
type of thing. So with that said, I'm gonna call for nominations, ask for nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Teresa Fox.
Last name, I wanna make sure.
I second that motion.
You have one R too.
Theres.
Well, that gets me.
Uh-huh.
T-H-E-R,
Larissa.
okay, as vice chair.
Like Mother Teresa.
Mother Teresa, yeah.
Literally Mother Teresa.
I would imagine she's grown up around a little bit of what I'm doing right now and has seen,
So
how am
can
I
I
doing, by
second
the
it?
way?
Very good.
All right, thank you. All right, are there any other nominations? Hearing none, is there a second for that we close the nominations?
Second it.
All right, so we have a second. Got that? Okay. All right, any discussion about that slate? Hearing none, all those in favor of Ms. Fox serving as vice chair? Okay, it's, abstain, so it's 4-0.
Can you vote for yourself?
You can, there, unless you have a conflict
Got
of
to have
interest
confidence
with a
in it.
financial gain, then you vote. So 4-0. All right, so we have a chair and a vice chair. With that said, Ms. Davis, the next item of business, of course, if you had minutes, you would have an agenda, so you'd have something to follow, and I will assist staff in making sure that there are planning board meeting agendas for you at all of your meetings, okay? So it's easy to follow, okay? Very easy to follow. Most of this project that I'm gonna be assisting you with is going to be like a single big, long agenda item. Until later on, then you might start having other things besides just minutes to vote on, okay? All right, so if you will acknowledge, I will take the floor and continue with the project discussion.
Mr. Flo, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Little bit of formality, I will always refer to you in an official capacity, just like I will, y'all are council or alderman?
Alderman.
You're alderman, so Alderman Fox, you know, so get used to it. Madam Chair, Chairwoman Davis, Vice Chair Fox, those kinds of things are how this will happen. And member, and I don't recall your last names,
Hogan.
Hogan? and-
Ray.
And Ray, Hogan and Ray, okay, Hogan and Ray. Is that spelled with an A, Y?
RAY, yes, sir.
All right, for those of you that were here last time, this is gonna be a repeat. The reason this is a repeat is when the last time I arrived, the board had not been fully appointed, and therefore it was a committee, and I went ahead and used that opportunity to kind of, as a committee, share where we were going. Now that you are an official board, and because you're at the beginning of that whole role, I'm gonna be a little bit, or quite a bit, repetitive. So there's no new material tonight for those of you that were here when we met back in early October. No new material tonight. We're gonna start sort of from scratch and walk through this. So I wanna share with you a little bit about the scope or breadth of this assignment that we'll be working on for 2024, okay? And it's going to be fed to you in manageable bites. One of my main goals is never to overwhelm or drown a board. Don't kill the board, okay? We want you to be able to have time for reviewing materials and things of that nature. So we've got two big projects. One is a plan, which is a vision, sort of what do we see, so that you're looking more comprehensively at the town's future and trying to, based on facts, based on conditions, based on values, and Tom, whom some of you met last term in October, will be feeding you a lot of that background information so that by the end of the year, close to the end of the year, you'll have a draft sort of vision and plan for the community that is intended to help the electeds make decisions. That's the goal, okay? You are advisory, they are a legislative body. Staff is an administrative arm. So staff will have roles, the advisory body will have roles, and the legislative body will have roles in formulating kind of a direction for the future. Now, what would a plan actually help with? A plan might help with unifying a big picture instead of looking at projects as just this project. Like, okay, we got a letter from the state, we can get some grant funds for a water line extension. Is there anything we can think of we need? Okay, that's common for towns to do. If you've got kind of a big picture vision for your town, you already know which direction you feel like is going to be important first. if you're talking about some type of growth or expansion or something like that. But you may be talking about some kind of preservation or maintaining existing areas. Both of those priorities are the correct priorities. And they can sometimes be competing forces. So I'm gonna say that again. You need good planning when you want to grow or change. You also need good planning when you want to protect and preserve. And most towns want some of each, because there are certain aspects of your community that deserve growth or change. There are certain aspects of your community that deserve, what do we do to make sure we reinforce this? So it might be that that water line is to replace an old degraded water line in an existing older part of town. But will it also create opportunities? Because where that water line ends is that the growth area. So it leads to informed decision making. That's what this plan really is, because a planning board's role under the statutes is to be the visionary. So I'm gonna slow down here for just a second, because this is critical. To be the visionary for the community. You can't set standards for development. You can't do any of that stuff unless it's following a plan. The state's not gonna give you grant money unless it's going towards, well, they might give it to you politically, but generally they won't give it to you based on merit unless it is going towards reaching an end goal, not just, well, we got this money, so we're gonna throw it over here, or we got that money, so we're gonna toss something over this way. It's to be able to make informed decisions and to head in a direction. So they always give almost any grant application says, do you have a plan? And they don't mean a plan for this water line, they mean a plan for where you're headed in the future. What part of town is it you're concerned about? Maybe you don't have sufficient fire flow in an area, something like that, where there's a conscious decision. So your job is to be that visionary, and that may conflict sometimes with the pressure that the elected officials are under. And there's a reason for that, and there's a reason that the state statutes are written the way they are, and that's to be able to balance that sort of big picture non-bias. In other words, you're not looking at voters. You're not looking at who owns the land. You're not looking at any of those self-interest kinds of details. You're looking out for the town. The governing board, however, when they make decisions, they may have a hearing required for grant funds and before you can advance the project, or for any number of things. And so they're going to receive your recommendation, which is that visionary, and then they're gonna sit up here and they're gonna listen to individual property owners and voters and everyone else who might be thinking about it big picture, and they might be thinking about it just in the here and now. And there's no wrong way to think about it, because both perspectives are very important in the decision-making process. But that way, they're not just thinking about the here and now. They're not just hearing from people that are concerned about, well, is it gonna make a mess in the road for the 6 months it takes to build the project? Is that a reason to reject or whatever, a big project? The big picture would say, we're gonna go past that. We're gonna look beyond that. We're gonna look at the overall benefit and what this leads to and how this helps us, and let the ones that signed up for it weigh your recommendation, big picture recommendation, with the unique perspectives that an individual homeowner might have, or an individual business might have that might be adjacent to the project or affected by the project. And that puts the hard decision really on them. It really does. But the state is not gonna pass out a lot of funds to towns that don't have some kind of direction, okay? We wanna go to Disney. Which way are we gonna go? We kind of need a route. We kind of need a direction. Well, towns' futures need a direction. It's not about a regulatory perspective. It's about an informed decision-making perspective and about a wisdom-based perspective. So you're going to be looking at it from information, from data, from trends, from what's going on broadly, and pass on a recommendation, and they will look at it with yours and with the individuals in the public, and that way it hopefully yields something that may not make everybody happy that moment, because it is going to make a mess in the road for 3 months or whatever it's going to do. But when that growing pain is over,
It'd be
everybody
nice.
benefits.
That'd be nice.
Does anybody remember when 181 was not as improved as it is today?
Yeah, it is better, they took that bad curve
Did
out.
everybody love living through the construction? Does anybody remember 321?
Yeah, too late.
Okay, I was in college when they started widening 321 on the Boone side, way back in the 1900s,
Whoa.
We knew you were
before
old.
the turn of the century. And now I'm finally driving on a
A
completed
nice drive.
project. You know, it was coming out of Lenore a little ways, and then they hopped up to Boone, you know, and they did a little bit there around Boone, you know, to get it to the edge of town, and then finally,
All came
you
together.
know, with, I call it the dogs playing poker curve. Everybody knows what I'm talking about, right? Dogs playing poker on the tapestries that would hang out by the road. And finally, they completed those last segments. And it took a long time. It took a long time. That was, you know, that project started in the 70s. And it was finished in the 20s.
Yeah,
Twenty-
Just last year.
Not too long ago.
Just last year.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what I mean by growing pains. Sometimes you have those, and decision makers have to weigh the good, the bad, the here, the now, the big picture, the not in my backyard, all those things. So my hat's off to those who run for office to be willing to take that input from so many directions and formalize and finalize those decisions. Your role is to advise them, because everybody else is gonna be poking at them. Individually, people will be poking at them, unless maybe the Chamber of Commerce comes after you or something. They're gonna be poking at you, and this way you've got a body that's trying to do something that is to give you more information to be able to make your decisions by. So I thank you for letting me sort of go into that little bit of depth. Since you're a new board, that's really what this learning moment is. Well, that plan that Tom's gonna be leading the process on is going to be that officially adopted thing that you have. And it can be thin, it can be thick, it can be all kinds of things. It can be very general, it can be very broad. It's not intended to be real specific. It's intended to identify strategy, so if money does pop up, you know that we can throw a copy of our plan in with our application. All we gotta do is literally stick it in there, and we gain points towards getting that low interest loan for that new water tank, or whatever the issue might be, or that park, or some sidewalk improvement because we've got too many cars running around everywhere, or whatever, okay? So enough of the plan. Now, what about the private investment side? Private investment, money spent by business owners or property owners, developers, whoever it is, you really have a great opportunity there. When they spend their money, do they spend their money only to their benefit? Do they spend it kind of in concert with the direction that you're going in? So I try to strive to write the standards and specifications for any type of growth or development in your town so that there's a 5-win scenario. That's the local resident, somebody that lives here. The local business community, that's not to be taken lightly. Natural resources, that's the environment. Remember, for those of you who've met me before, I'm not a Republican, sorry. I'm not a Democrat. Not sorry about either one, because I believe that they're both fundamentally correct to a point. They both can be a little bit out there if they get too far over on that left side or too far over on that right side. And I'm talking for you, rights, my rights and lefts are not backwards, that's for them. I used to be a surveyor, so I know how to tell somebody to the right,
Cause that's right. on
because
her
that's
neck.
their right. Go to the left. So, and because I do believe in the system. The system really works as long as the extremities don't get too all my way and the heck with your way. You know, we actually do have to have tree cutters and tree huggers. You can't just have
One or the other.
cutting all the trees down and to heck with the water. And you can't have just protect all the trees and we can't have any commerce. Neither one is gonna work. okay? Neither one is gonna work. So I'm a big believer in kind of driving down the moderate middle of the road roughly, you know? You might have your fiscal conservative or fiscal liberal or whatever it is, that's fine, that doesn't bother me at all. I know where I am in that little matrix, but I'm clearly in here somewhere, okay? And I try to help boards to understand that when they're making these kinds of determinations, sometimes they have to find themselves looking more in a holistic way. So that's what you're gonna be hearing from me. Okay, you're gonna be hearing a lot of this thing that is protective of both natural resources, business, community, and what have you. So I call it the 5 wins. Again, that resident, local business, natural resources. The 4th one is leadership. That's the electeds, that's the appointed boards, that's the staff team that's working there to help facilitate through your local government or state government or whatever it is. But the leadership of your community has to be one of those winners, those 5 winners. And the last one, and not the least one, are those persons looking to invest in your community. This is where I'm circling back to that point I made a moment ago about private investment. You know, early on I talked about grants and loans from the state or whatever it might be. But private money actually builds more infrastructure in the typical town than public money does.
We have 6. The county is the 6th one. They consume a lot of our land, and they just put stuff wherever they want to, and
Well,
that's something that.
inside the town limits?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They
Well,
have our best land.
that civic activity is gonna be an element of what we talk about as we get further into the weeds, okay? You'll be learning about this over the next, by this summer sometimes you'll feel like you got a pretty good perspective on this. So today's really kind of grasping the role. So with that plan, which has to be an adopted plan of some sort, you then gain the authority to set the standards and specs. They don't want you going out and applying for grants. They don't want you setting standards and all that for development without a direction. You're going somewhere. Which way is it? What's our priority? What are our concerns? And how are we addressing that? Now, if you do that 5 win correctly, then you actually open the door to positive investment in your community. Okay? To the positives of investment in your community. And which ultimately resides in a process that you'll be learning a lot about probably in the, I would say, February meeting when we start getting to the next grouping. So with that said, I'm gonna shift our gears and talk a little bit about what more of my role will be, and that is a development ordinance that sets those standards and specifications. And it's about those 5 wins. It's not about saying no, it's not about regulation, it's about facilitating. We're facilitating, but we're facilitating so that we all win, not you win, we lose. Because remember, if there's a winner and a loser, it's not a good plan. If there's a winner and a loser, it's not a good plan. This is not football. We're not trying to beat the persons that are looking to invest here up. We just want to help them go in such a way that they succeed and the town succeeds, okay? So if you look at that reading guide at the very beginning of your notebook, there are some subtle little lines under every so many articles. So you'll see one under Article 6, a little line, okay? You'll see one further down under 23 and under 20 and 15 and 17, 21, 10, and then down at the TSSM. Each one of those represents a stepping stone. And how these stepping stones will work is each grouping will appear over a 2-month period. So I will, let's say at your January meeting, I will introduce a batch. And I break them down into these groupings like administrative procedural. You see that grouping, that first grouping, administrative procedural. That is stuff that's largely defined by our state statutes. We have some wiggle room in some of it, but not a ton. So it's not really reinventing the wheel. I don't reinvent that stuff at all. There's no reason to. There's pick a section in there, variances and appeals. There's not much we can change in there. amendments. There's not much we can change in there, but my wording is intended to set it in place for the locality to be consistent with the way the state law says localities have to do it. So our ordinance will be speaking to those developers or whatever they are, just like the state law speaks to the town. That's the way the state law, it's called enabling legislation. The state law speaks to you as a municipality. And then we have to sort of convert that to speak to our public and to those looking to do development. So that first group of administrative procedural is what I refer to affectionately as the boring stuff. And I'm tricking you with it by bringing it up first. It's going to be boring reading. But it's not as boring as the second grouping, state and federal mandates or equivalents. Got a problem sleeping? Pick up one of those articles. You'll be out in no time. That's stuff we don't have much choice for. So think of our role here locally as the kids. We're the kids. The town is the kids. There are 550 towns in North Carolina. Cities and towns, 550. There are 100 counties. So there are 650 kids in North Carolina. Our parents are the state. We're a big family. Our parents are the state. The state enables, creates, authorizes us. We can't do anything that they do not authorize us to do. We are, as a town, a political subdivision of the state of North Carolina. We're not an autonomous, do anything we want to group, regardless of what people think. Okay, whether it's leadership that thinks that, or whether it's the public that thinks that, we are an animal, a creation of the state of North Carolina, and we have to stay in bounds inside their parameters. Well, guess what? They have parents too, federal. The federal government is our grandparent. Okay, they're our grandparents, and the grandparents sometimes will come up with these big, broad policies. 1969, EPA was created. 70, EPA was created. Spread across the country. Pick a year, pick a big program, the 201 facilities, all the wastewater had to be done this way, or pick some other thing that had to be done a certain way. And those mandates, in many instances, the federal government says, okay, the EPA is going to write them up, and then they're going to just say, well, you know what, states, y'all have to make sure everybody does it. And the states catch this hot potato one day, and they say, we don't want it, so we're going to throw it at the towns. And so we end up inheriting certain functions and roles, and we will go into that a little bit, that we have to have a role in. Not necessarily in charge of, because there are some things we can leave with the state, and there are some things we may say, well, we don't really want to leave that with the state, and we'll dig into that later. You'll be learning about those really boring items in a few months. So let me stop at that point for just a second and say that is the part that will be boring as all get out to you. Now, Tom will be working with you on the plan, which will be more exciting, but my stuff is going to be awful. You're going to hate me. All you need to do is look at it. If you see anything, have any ideas, ask questions, talk about it. I'm not going to encourage you to not read it, okay? But it'll be up to you. But there's not a lot of wiggle room in those first groupings. Now, why do I load that up front? It's because Tom and I have to figure out the town. We have to get to know Newland. So while I've got you occupied with the boring stuff, I'm going to be digging into the real character elements. That's what that third grouping is. See, the standards and specifications for achieving the desired character of the town. I got to figure you out there before I can help you get to where what we're going to do with Tom's process, where we want to go. You follow me? So I encourage leadership at the elected level to be here, all of them. All they got to do is post that there may be a quorum present, but that no action will be taken. They're not having a meeting, they're not voting, they're not deciding anything, but they're learning. If they don't do that, what's gonna happen is you're gonna spend a year, and then you're gonna recommend whatever the final products look like, and it's gonna go to them, and then they're gonna start over. And that's not productive. They really need to be, so thank you for being here. You really
So were they
need to be
invited?
learning.
They were invited to come?
They know about the
They know
meeting.
about it.
Well, I'm gonna continuously encourage them to at least watch the videos, do something so that you're following along, and so that they learn a lot about the background for everything as well at the same time. So when we get to that third grouping, that's about the character of the community. That's when you're gonna suddenly start digging in, you're gonna be engaged. When we get to that stuff, you will have enough experience with sort of going through the boring parts to where you're gonna be a ready participant, I can assure you. I've done this only a million times, and I know how it goes, and so thank you in advance. Now, let's get down to just a little bit of what that monthly activity will actually look and feel like. So let's take that first grouping, 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'm gonna say this about it, 2 is missing for a reason, and you'll learn about that soon enough. Because these documents that have standards in them aren't gonna be quite like the plan. The plan will read like a story about you and where you wanna go. But the standards and specifications are not. They're gonna be more like a encyclopedia of all the moving parts. You don't pick up an encyclopedia and just start reading about whatever A and B is, okay, and end up with zebras, right? You kind of go to your subject. And so that's the way the standards and specifications will work. And so they'll be built in silos. So anything to do with a particular topic will be together, and then we speak to how they weave together. So we don't write a story about building a neighborhood and then write a separate story about doing a shopping center or whatever, okay? We don't do it that way. We build these things in silos, and then there's a very logical way to undertake a project. Where does a business start? Where does a developer start? Where does anybody start if they're going to go down one of those paths and do something big here? Open a new lodge, open a new hotel, build a neighborhood with 20 houses, or whatever the case might be. And so we try to make it make sense. And I'm glad to say we actually have a lot of people that agree that do that for a living. I was on the phone on the way up here with someone doing, out of Dallas, Texas, doing a business park in one of the towns where they've adopted our approach back about 3 years ago or 2 years ago. That little town is experiencing a lot of activity, and it's very positive because they're in the right place at the right time. So they were gonna get either hit upside the head with a baseball bat, or they were gonna be able to go keep all of this going in the direction they wanna go in, and the developers are liking it and the town leadership is liking it, and that's when I feel good, when it works. So what does your agenda look like? And we're just about to the end, What is your agenda gonna look like? This first grouping, 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6, will be introduced to you. You already have 4, but that package, the rest of those will be introduced to you at your next meeting in January, okay? When I say introduced, we will literally pass them out. We will talk about what they really are about, and then you will have a month to take a look at that material. Some of these articles might be, I'm just looking at 14 is 2 pages, 15 is 2 pages, 1 is about 7 pages. Definitions is long, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The Planning Board of Adjustments, you've seen that already. You see it's, I think, 5 or 6 pages, something like that. Variances and appeals, about 4 pages. So none of this is really extensive material, and you're looking at little silos. So you'll have about a month to review that. Then at the second, well, that'll be the third meeting. So at the February meeting, first on the agenda under this project will be a review of those, where any questions, any discussions, any comments, any feedback, any discussion that needs to take place. And once we're finished with any of that, ideas, whatever you've got. I know any changes, whatever. Then you don't vote on anything. We just sort of say, okay, this is where we are on that. We're gonna set that aside. And then I introduce the second batch. So in February, I'll introduce batch number 2, and then at the beginning of the March meeting, we will review batch number 2. So every month, you will either be introduced or review the same batch, and then introduce the next batch. Does that make sense? Kind of a hopscotch, and that keeps it digestible, it keeps it focused, we're not jumping around all over the place. We will go sort of from topic to topic. So what does definitions mean? I'm gonna go ahead and tell you that right now, since I teased on it a minute ago, because when you see that one, you're gonna say, oh no, this is like 45 pages. Definitions is not definitions of words in most cases, unless there's a state law that says we have to use a specific definition of a specific word. And it does that in some cases. But usually it is a definition of a phrase, okay? We all know what the word use means. We all know what the word adult means. But we have to define the term adult use. And we have to. And I shocked you with that one, didn't I? Right away. Because that is a thing that has to be addressed, because it is a thing that the state legislature in this state has protected as a use. That every town has to allow that somehow, way, shape, form, or another. And so that's an example. We will have things like, what is a floodplain? We know what a flood is, we know what a plain is. It's a flat thing, right? What's floodplain? And there's all kinds of nuances. So those phrases are largely the reason for the definitions. Because what does that phrase mean in the context of these standards and specifications? What does Board of Aldermen? It is your Board of Aldermen. What is the Planning Board? We literally, because of the legal litigious arena that we function in every day, need to just have those things clarified. So there's no debate over what you think land development is and what I think land development is, right? So those things are defined. Not much wiggle room in most of it, but you might say, well, we want to add a different type of school. Like I've got like 3 classifications of schools, you know, in there. Defining school. What's a school in the context of that term? You know, sometimes it might be what you think of as an elementary or a middle school or a high school. Sometimes it might be something like a community college or some type of trade or craft school. Sometimes it might be someone who is teaching music to students in their home. Follow me? So we have to have some clarity to what all these things might be, so that when an issue comes up, we can be very consistent in how we're treating people. And that's the bottom line, is to be consistent in how we treat people. Okay? So when somebody comes in and says, well, this is the kind of house we build, and somebody else says, well, that's the kind of house, the other house is the one we build, they both have the same rights. You might like one better than the other, but they both have the same rights, and that's where we have to be very clear in that, okay? We can't be arbitrary. State law has said that staff cannot be subjective. We can only make decisions based upon some kind of written guidance and policy. Planning boards need that written guidance and policy. The Board of Adjustment, which is your alter ego, we'll get into that someday, needs that clarity. And the governing board has to be careful when they start commingling administrative determinations with legislative acts. You're elected to do legislative acts. Sometimes these boards will think that they know better and they'll try to jump over here and do administrative determinations. The danger there is an administrative determination is appealable. No different than it is if Bill were working with somebody and they wanted to appeal his decision, a board voting on something and using a subjective decision, not following the standards, that's appealable, and you pay. The town pays. That's in the law now. That's new. That's about 4 years old. If you are wrong, The town pays all costs. No longer do they have to ask a court to approve reimbursement of attorney fees or court costs or experts and everything else, and if they bring a challenge to the town. And so there's some steamrolling going on out there, so you wanna build your defenses and everybody stay in their lane, advisory, administrative, and legislative, because guess what? In the legislative role, you don't have to justify a no vote, only a yes vote. And that is the most powerful arena in local government. Under this chapter of the state law, you actually have to justify a change. You have to find it consistent with the plan. You have to make a written statement, and you do too, of how it's consistent with that plan and how it's reasonable in the best interest of the town. You can't just vote yes. You have to have this statement. So normally staff will prepare drafts of all that, so you've got that. But for you to decide, well, we're not ready for that over there. You don't even have to say that. You can just, how about no? So everybody's gonna learn a lot about it, because one of the biggest mistakes I see, and particularly in very small towns, is a perception that the individual governing board members have a lot of authority. And it's just not true. I can't go, this was a good one that happened this week. A planning board chair in a town that I serve was elected to the board of aldermen of a town that I serve, and was sworn in a little over a week ago. The very next day, called the police chief and asked the police chief to come take care of Coyote. Can you come shoot this for me? Thank you. Appreciate you. If you don't mind, come on out now. Town manager, of course, is like, wait a minute, hold on. We don't need micromanagement coming from individual elected aldermen. That's not the role. That's actually a commissioner form of government, which you just don't see in North Carolina. We call them county commissioners, but they don't function as commissioners. In North Carolina, they all, whether you're a council member, an alderman, or a commissioner, they all are essentially the same thing. In other states, a commissioner is quite different. You might have a commissioner over parks. So you are the person over parks and would work with the management over whatever's going on. You could make decisions. Do we fix the fan belt on the dump truck? Yes, I approve we buy a fan belt. That type of thing. So, but that's not North Carolina. So my job is not to tell you what you want to hear, is to tell you what you need to hear. So I'm going to always shoot very straight with everybody, okay? And it could be a little bit of a wake-up call. Some people might get a little uncomfortable, and if so, I can take it, throw it at me, I can handle it. That's my job, that's my role, that's what I'm here to do, is to help you succeed and stay in bounds, to minimize your financial exposure out there when you do the things that you do in a leadership role. That's the end result, is to save the town money, to save the tax, which is the taxpayers, right? The town doesn't have a dime, right? Taxpayers have those dimes, right? So that's not just some other magic money. That's taxpayer money that came from somewhere, whether it came from a sales tax or a gas tax or a property tax or whatever it was. So with that said, you see a little bit about how this is going, and you've already been provided with Article 4. I want to go ahead and get that in your hands right away, because you're a brand new board and you haven't been around the block for 20 years or 30 years on this, so that you can read a little bit about what your authority is, what your power is, and things of that nature. It also goes into how you were appointed, the things that have to happen. It's 3-year terms. The initial appointment's going to be staggered. There'll be some for 3, some for 2, some for 1. Then when the 2-year term expires, or the 1-year term expires, then their reappointment will be for 3, so that in theory, not everybody expires at the same time, and everybody's on a 3-year term after that initial round of appointments. And so don't worry too much. I hope they didn't use their favorite gets the 3-year, and the one they're not so sure about gets the 1 year.
I don't think they said.
Don't take it personally if you did, because it's intended, and it's required by state law actually, that you're on 3-year terms. Okay, and that they be appointed to stagger. Okay, so so what you're reading is the local take on what they tell us we have to do, okay? Behind the planning board, which is only about 2 pages, is the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment, and you'll learn a lot about this at the next couple of meetings, is not advisory at all. And it's likely that you will also be appointed to serve on that board as well. That's always my recommendation, is to have the planning board and the Board of Adjustment in a very small town made up of the same group, because the Board of Adjustment might only need to meet once every 3 years. I like to recommend that they still have a meeting at least once a year so that they are kind of fresh, because they're not needed till they're needed. The planning board's always visionary and talking about stuff like y'all might work on some ideas you've got for something going on downtown or somewhere, you know. And I'm just looking fast forward out a couple of years when you're kind of on your own and you're working with staff to accomplish some things. So you will function not as a committee, but as a very formal body, okay? But when that Board of Adjustment role comes up, it means that something isn't quite right. Because there are going to be 3 functions in the ordinance for the Board of Adjustment. One of them is going to be to hear that appeal, that administrative appeal. Someone says that Bill they don't like Bill's interpretation, and they think that they should be able to read it differently. The Board of Adjustment is the one that looks at it and determines the final interpretation. What is the official interpretation? And I'm going to give you a classic example that just happened to me in the past year or so. We had in home occupations, we had standards. Home occupation means that little thing you do out of your house that's typically a home occupation you can't really tell. A true home occupation, you wouldn't know that somebody might, you know, do medical billing or something like that in a spare room in the house on their computer, or an accountant, or something like that where it's pretty invisible, okay? It doesn't generate traffic, it doesn't have a bunch of employees or whatever. So we set some standards for that, right? We say, okay, maybe you can have an employee, or maybe you can have 2 that report every day to work there in the neighborhood. Just be prepared, the more employees you let them have in the neighborhood, the more complaints you're gonna generate at town hall. Well, one of the things it said was no odors. You know, if you're producing something, let's say you're using your kitchen to whip up something that has an odor to it that bugs people, right? Well, somebody came along and they wanted to put in one of these little prefabricated utility building type things, a little wooden one, like a 12 by 18 or something like that building in their backyard, and they were gonna have a kitchen put in it, and they were gonna do cookies. They had become the cookie lady in that area in Rowan County. And the cookie lady wanted to stop doing it in her house, because she'd have to make my wife makes them, she doesn't sell them, she just gives them to everybody. But when it's going on, it's going on. And this lady wanted to be able to have a place where she could just focus on doing that and selling the cookies. And my interpretation as their administrator was that odor from this cooking process would not be one of the eligible characteristics of a home occupation. And so she appealed and went to the Board of Adjustment, okay, and said, Board of Adjustment, you know, I don't believe that odor is all odors. I believe that the intent of that writing, which I actually wrote it, okay, was to mean only noxious odors. And to me, I didn't take it personally at all. And the Board of Adjustment said, you know what, we're gonna agree. We want that interpreted as noxious odors. And I said, no problem. I will add that word and to where it is clear that we're only talking about noxious odors. So if we have odors that some people think are nice, then apparently it's not an odor. And that's what that Board of Adjustment's ruling was, that baked goods, the aroma of baked goods is not odor. So it drew a line between positive odors or smells and negative odors or smells or aromas or whatever the case might be. And so that's an example of a Board of Adjustment type of thing. You also deal with variances. Maybe the standards call for something, and because of the way the creek's eroding away, there's no way they can do that. They need a break. It's called a variance. And they show that evidence, so here's the information, you can hear the pictures, look at this. Here's the corner of my house, and I'm trying to fix this room over here, you know, and I can't get any closer to that creek, I can't keep going that way or I'm gonna lose my house. I need to be able to do it over this way or something like that. Well, that's a variance, that's one of your roles. All of that's based on basically evidence, basically fact. It's not subjective, like, well, we think that's okay. It's, okay, you've shown us that there's a real need to let you off the hook on this rule, or this standard, or this specification, okay? The third one is called a special use permit. And the way that I will be presenting those to you is I typically take all the scary stuff and I put one of those in the path. Okay, so if somebody says, maybe it's something I saw on the news this morning, an energy company doing windmills. Maybe somebody comes up and they want to do a whole row of these giant wind farm windmills right here across something. Well, all of these energy things, I've put a special use permit in the path, so they have to show evidence of whatever the criteria is that we want to establish, that they are not going to create this problem or that problem. Maybe it's a visual, maybe it's an environmental, maybe it's a migratory bird, maybe it's water, whatever it is. That's an example. Another example might be an asphalt plant. And people are like, oh, that's making me a little nervous. So those scary things, I put a special use permit in the process. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means if you do it, there's a lot more detail that you're gonna have to prove. And if they can't prove that, then they can't get that special use permit. But on those scary things, I also put in front of it a legislative act. So with those things that typically require special use permits can't be in a normal industrial area. They might have to be in a heavy industrial area, which would mean that you would need to subjectively approve a heavy industrial, not just that. A normal industrial, no big deal. But something that's really gonna be rugged, that's gonna scare the heck out of people, that's gonna create a lot of controversy, we put a step in there so that decision's made. If that decision's made, then they can go to the special use permit. So we build in some safeguards, mostly to make sure that the public has a chance to weigh in. Because every step of the way, there'd be different kinds of public involvement opportunities for that. You may say, I don't like that, we don't want that tool. That's fine. So here's my final word tonight about these standards and things that I bring up. I'm gonna bring, anybody here remember the Ragu commercials? Ragu, it's in there? Remember that?
Yeah.
Ragu, spaghetti sauce, it's in there, meaning everything's already in there, right?
It's in there.
Well,
It's going to in where?
it's a lot easier for me to bring you an example where it's in there. And then if you're not comfortable, we can change it or remove it or whatever. But if I brought you something kind of empty and you said, well, what about this topic or that topic, then I'd need to go figure it out and bring it to you. And I've been around this block so many times, I've got this huge library of all the stuff that I start with, and every town makes adjustments to it. So I don't reinvent the wheel. I don't make any secret about that. I do not reinvent the wheel. I invented the wheel a long time ago, and then I've built on it and it constantly improves. So the last one I did, or the one I'm finishing up right now in Marvin, North Carolina, little things that I've improved in there just because of the discussions with the planning board, that you might see some of their versions because it's gotten a little better and a little better and a little better and a little better. And you might say, well, I don't like that. And I'll say, no problem, because I know that I've already got a version that's not quite like that. It's something else that I've used over here. So I've already got language, so I don't have to go make up something. I can, unless you come up with something I've never seen before, chances are I've dealt with it in one form or another, and we just have to make sure that we don't create conflicts in our ordinance. So sometimes to add something, I might have to go around in some other places and make adjustments to make sure that everything works like it should, because we want it to be seamless for the business community, for development community, for an individual homeowner, for whatever the case might be that is looking to undertake a project, and we want to make it clear and easy, but also at the end of the day, not something where everybody says, well, that's awful, I can't believe that. They did that, and, you know, now we've got to live with it, because most things that happen in a town are gonna be there about 40 years minimum. If you get a 7-Eleven and you wish it was across the street instead of over there, it's gonna be there for about 40 years minimum. I've not seen too many projects come and go in less time where the building's gone. I've seen a few. Charlotte Coliseum, circa 1980, what, 8, something like that, 86?
85, 86.
Yeah, that Charlotte Coliseum, it was
Nice
built about the time I
Coliseum.
moved to that area, and lo and behold, it was gone in another 15 years. I'm like, wow, that didn't take long. So, but generally speaking, that's an exception to the rule. So you wanna make sure that you're thinking ahead on this, and you wanna catch things on paper before you're like, oh no, now we just gotta live with it. So I'm not about regulation, I'm about facilitation. This is not about saying no, this is about how do we work together to get it where everybody's comfortable with it. The hard decision is made at the governing board level when a change in direction needs to be made. If somebody comes up and they say, well, we wanna wipe out all these houses and build some apartments. Well, that's the kind of level of change in use where it's gonna require a legislative gate to go through. And when and if you are good with that, you approve it, you recommend for or against, they vote for or against. If they approve it, then once it's done, then the standards in the ordinance will take over and take it to the finish line. You don't have to worry about those little details, because I put all that in the ragu. So this thing is gonna be fairly hefty at the end of the day. Some mandate stuff and some just stuff that we can come up with ourselves, but it's intended to protect you. There will be tools in there that you may think, will we won't ever need this. Well, here's the problem. There's case law out there that if it's not addressed, then it's presumed okay. So when you look at this and you say, well, you know, Mr. Flo, you've got stuff in here that we just don't think we'll ever see, careful. If you don't need it, you don't need it. I bought a massive tool set. Remember, those of you that have met me before, I went to a technical high school, was gonna be a mechanic. Never even thought about college until I was told to go to college at 22 years old by my employer. Okay, I thought I was gonna be a mechanic. I have a massive tool set, and I use that stuff. I can work on my own stuff, and I enjoy doing that. I'm getting ready to start a Volkswagen. I just finished a Jeep truck, 1987 Jeep J10 truck.
Wow.
Made a killing on it. Made a killing on that truck. And it now lives in Welcome, North Carolina. There is still something in that box that's 45 years old that I've not used. There's gotta be at least an Allen wrench or a socket or something, one particular size of one particular something I still haven't used. But last night, my middle son and I used a piece I had never used before. I had a brand new socket adapter that's 40 years old. It had never been used. I've never stuck a 1/4-inch adapter on a 1/2-inch ratchet, which I was actually putting it on a pull handle torque wrench, because one of my son's car, when he had a wheel refinish, the shop over tightened his front wheels on a BMW. We set that torque wrench at 150 pounds to break it, and we were clicking when we finally broke those lugs loose.
That's insane.
And the only way I could do it, because it was so tight, is a star pattern socket would slip. I had to use a hex. The only hexes I had were 3/8. So I had to put them on a half, put them on there, pull the dickens out of it, and it worked. We got them all broken loose. So you're gonna have a combination of the ragu and a giant Craftsman tool set,
Lifetime warranty.
okay? And when people come to town and they've got something they're gonna throw at you, you're gonna pretty well be able to address it. clearly, and that's the point. And you get to decide how detailed we want to be, or how we want something to go. If we do apartments, what do? You know, or do we wake up one day and this thing dwarfs the town? You know, if we don't do apartments, if we don't say anything, what happens? So that's what's gonna be coming down this pipeline. And Bill has worked with me before on this kind of thing. He knows I'm not quite crazy, I hope,
No, you're,
just a little.
Yeah.
But it works. So we lost one of our audience members. I hope I didn't terrorize him.
No, he's okay.
It-
Yeah.
I just want everybody to understand that the best solution is to be prepared for change that comes to your town. Because you can't be subjective. You can't be subjective. If you're subjective, you're violating rights. If you violate rights, you pay. So don't violate rights. That's what I say. Thank you very much. You will see an agenda. You will see your first package, less the Article 4, which you already have, at your next meeting. And we will start the hopscotch, and I will be gentle as we go along. And you don't need to worry about voting on anything until we get to the end of the project. That way you can take it all in. It'll never be too late to change anything. Just because we put something on the side after a meeting or two, it's not done until we get to the end, and because you might come up with something in 6 months that sends you back to think, aha, now I know what we ought to change over there, okay? How long, what time is it?
7:18.
7:18, so that's about how long I was anticipating, about an hour. So thank you all for indulging me, and I look forward to working with you now formally, and congratulations to you all for being appointed, and to the chair and vice chair for your election by your peers. Any questions of me?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I just wanna add, as you go through this, these are a lot of weird concepts that we don't normally think of, so if you don't understand something, ask questions. You need to understand what we're doing as we go along, because as Rick said, you're gonna get down the road 4 months, 5 months, and go, huh? Oh, that's right, we did this over here, okay. And all this stuff will build one on top of another. Okay, and as Rick was saying, we can't be reactive to the development pressures that we are going to experience. Well, all the events that we're having here are driving people here to town. We're seeing an influx of people coming in. If you look at our utility billing, we're getting new accounts almost weekly now. Before, we might get one, in the summertime. We might get 4 or 5 in the summertime. Now it's almost weekly we're getting new accounts. So we're starting to see all this stuff, and we're starting to see weird development pressures. So migrant housing, we're starting to see a lot of that. That's just one of the things that are coming down. There's clamoring for certain types of businesses. With a plan, we can show Food Lion, this is our vision of the town, and they can look at it and buy into it and go, yeah, we do want to move here, and this is a good spot for us. And so all this stuff helps them do their marketing and their research in order to decide where they want to move to.
Very well said. Contrary to popular belief, pretty much any franchise or large corporation is going to look for a way that they can be entitled. The days of the good old boy getting a nod from somebody on the board or the mayor or somebody like that saying, yeah, that'd be all right, you just go right ahead, those are over. Because of underwriting and financials, especially since the Dodd-Frank Act in 2009 or 10. Nowadays, you see a lot of this need for verification, because their underwriters in finance are looking for that, and risk mitigation and everything else. So they want, like he said, Food Line, there's nothing would suit them better than to know that they've got all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed, not some wink and a nod, and they get going and then they find out, whoops, so you'd be surprised. It's a lot of perceptions out there, but those groups typically like to get that. Now, I'm not talking about over-regulation, I'm talking about setting standards and specifications so they know that what they've got is good to go.
And I can tell you, being on the professional development side, the developer doesn't care too much about the regulatory cost they care about the time it takes to get through it.
Right,
So I did cell towers in Florida, I mean, 8,000 cell towers in Florida over a 4-year period. They didn't care if it cost $20,000 to get a special use permit, they wanted to know how long it would take.
we take to do it.
Because the moment a cell tower comes online, they're making that, 15 minutes later, they've made that money back. Same with the grocery store, how long is it gonna take us to start?
We need to.
Yeah, and do I have to tear down a building, do I have to go through special hoops on regulations, does it take me 4 months to get through regulations? You know, they want predictability, they wanna be able to sit at the beginning of a project, lay out a timeline, and at the end of that timeline, be right on, or early.
And their investment is insured, basically.
Yes. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
that's
so-
why all of this is so valuable.
This is a little question, and I don't know with you, but we had this book last time.
Right, I'll address
So what are
that.
we doing with the stuff that was in there?
I'll
Because
address
it's-
that. This is a, one that we spec, and we don't get a kickback from the manufacturer, but it's a heavier duty bonding that we had spec, the tabs, so you've got enough tabs for everything. We have something that will be able to, that you'll be able to use for years to come. It's because you'll probably stick your minutes in there, you might stick your agendas in there, you might build on some of the things that you have from a meeting that you received, because it'll kind of be your file cabinet for your activity on this project. And I don't like using a kind of a temporary binder that might not last you very long.
So these are in this book, what do you want us to do?
You can,
Everything in your book that was sitting on that dais is everything. So the old books you can leave here and we'll take care of it. The new books have all the stuff in it. We just printed it all out.
I have notes in the old one. Can I
You can
keep
take
it?
them with you.
switch them
Okay,
around,
thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine.
switch them
We're
out.
not saying you can't, we're just saying what you have in front of you is the complete set.
Those ones that-
And the old set, you can just leave here and we'll take care of it.
I'll give you a hint, if you look at the end of it, you'll see a round binder in the old book, and you'll see a D-shaped binder in the other one. They actually they deal with big volumes of paper a lot better when you're flipping and moving around and opening and closing a lot, and you will be, over the next year with it, so we want to make sure your notebooks last. So, all right.
Thank you for that.
Thank
Well,
you so
Merry
much.
Christmas, everybody.
Merry
Hope you all
Christmas.
have a great holiday
See you in
season,
January.
and,
So administratively, the chair can call the meeting to a close
yeah, administratively, you can adjourn the meeting.
at 7:25.
7:25, meeting adjourned.
Yay!
Thank you.
Those are trash.
I was looking for a thing so you could hit it. Where'd you go?
Gavel. I asked for one.
I got the